Intel was an interesting one because, you kind of have it's kind of a tale of two pieces of news, right? The first piece of news is, well, how'd they do this quarter? And this quarter was good against the expectations they had set. They beat. The problem was, and this is often a problem, is a beat in this quarter is old news, and the guide is always what's sort of set. So if you can't kind of hit on all three, you're never, a beat, miss,
Yeah.
may as well be a miss in this era. And that's why Intel saw a 10% drop. Look, I'm going to kind of give it two sides. I mean, there were some things that would have been very indicative that Intel was going to have a harder quarter. And there were some things that needed to, just Mobileye, for instance. You saw that their guide going forward was going to be a huge miss. Now, Mobileye is not a massive part of the business, but Mobileye has been one of the growth vectors of the company over the past several quarters. Pat, the big thing, though, that everybody I think is really questioning right now is all about the data center and AI business. You see the flourishing businesses of NVIDIA, even on the software side, you see Microsoft, you see all the investment in growth, you hear about AWS and Inferentia. The question mark about how Intel, between its CPUs and its GPU, well, not GPU business, and of course its ASIC, Gaudi 2, and it's the oncoming Gaudi 3, and what it's got going on there is, when is that going to start to get momentum and help data centers start to show growth year on year? It was another down quarter. And again, now we're into that period of time where you're down year on year against down quarters. So a couple of years back, it was like, well, they're down, but they were having these remarkable quarters. Now they're down. Now we're supposed to be seeing it pick up. We also know that there's this really important AI PC trend, but that was actually really pretty positive. You saw client computing kind of picked up off the bottom. I think it was 33% up on a year-over-year basis. Pat was, you and I got to talk to Pat Gelsinger. He was pretty realistic about it. He mentioned some of the forces, some of the cyclicality. He mentioned Mobileye. So all these things kind of came at once, and it caused the guide to be a pretty substantial miss. I think it was more than $1 billion off the miss. Having said that, Pat, I'm still pretty positive about what the next 4 quarters. Gelsinger said to us, every quarter and on a year-over-year basis, we will see improvement on the company's earnings. We've seen really good growth in foundry services, 63% up year on year. Not just 63% up, but more, winning some really great packaging deals. Starting to get, its process deals underway. I think with Intel 3, starting to go to market with that. Confirm me if I'm wrong on that one. So a lot going on here, Pat, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic AI is not over. They have a shot of catching up. I saw you wrote a great paper on their kind of overall AI strategy. Had some good comments on CNBC.
I think you wrote one too.
I did, and that'll come out later. But it's process. It's in the making. It's been a good turn under Gelsinger. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think people think a ship like this can turn in a day. It's not going to turn in a day. It takes some.
So I'm going to spend a little time on the quarter, and then you spent a lot of time on the future. I mean, they beat on revenue and they beat on profits, so they had a beat. Gross margin is the best way, I believe, to measure a chip company, because it gets into its design, your design, and it hits the fabrication, and it hits the pricing, right? And Intel years back was at 70%, and then they went in the 30s. Okay, their gross margins were up 3%. Gross margins up 3% sequentially and 6.5% year on year. That's huge. I think. Also, it hits $3 billion OpEx savings goal. That was a year, obviously not for the quarter. They opened up they've got the first foundry offering, EUV offering in US and Europe, and on track, 5 nodes in 4 years. And the reason why I always get back to the 5 and 4 is because it will determine Intel's cost competitiveness and performance competitiveness. So super interesting. So 2024, I mean, I overall, I mean, I put this quarter, I wouldn't say a mulligan, but when I look at how bad Mobileye, 5G telco biz, and FPGA when, and those were usually things that helped the business. The core business, right, was definitely at the low end of what you would expect for seasonality. I would have expected a little bit more bullishness on Q1 on the PC side. On the data center side, they're challenged. I mean, they've got a ton of homegrown stuff coming after them. You've got AMD that's perpetually strong. And you also have, as Dan, you and I have sat with enterprise OEM number one people, and they've had a consistent theme of, hey, we've got chassis with CPUs that are waiting for GPUs that we can't ship, right? And there's also been this huge requirement to bring on generative AI in the CSPs. And many of those CSPs have found ways to get NVIDIA and AMD's latest and greatest and just stick them in the same chassis. So there's not a need to ship a new server with an Intel CPU. Now, if AMD comes out and they have an amazing quarter, right, that will tell us a lot. So, I went into earnings looking for gross margin improvement. We saw that. I looked at a lift from Core Ultra, didn't see that. I still stick to my guns that I do believe that industry wide we're going to start seeing the real AI, the bigger AI PC action in the middle of the year when Qualcomm comes out. And I believe that there will be operating system support, and then AMD and Intel after that. So I think Q4 is the big lift on PCs. On the server side, Intel has some really interesting stuff coming out. I mean, you've got Intel 3 with Sierra Forest and Granite Rapids. You've got 18A, which is the second half thing for Panther Lake, right? And those are some pretty exciting stuff. 18A is already in the fab, right? Which, yeah, I usually give it a year between that, but it was in the fab in the fourth quarter, and we're going to see servers in the second half, and I'm going to put that at Q4. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I don't view my long-term prognosis of Intel any different after this quarter than the long term. I'm not an equities analyst. I'm an industry analyst, so I do look at things in a different way. And I want to remind everybody, for all the haters of Intel, Intel still has 80% of the PC market and around 80% of the server market.
Yeah, I feel like I got to say that all the time to people. Like, yes, they've ceded some market share, but they're, people trade them like they're, Blockbuster Video sometimes, or like, like they're Radio Shack. I mean, it's far from that. And they've got an incredible distribution and channel too, which it's not easy to unwind that. It's going to take a lot of work. And, the competitors have made great strides, but Intel's directionally I think it's finding its sea legs. I think it has found its sea legs, Pat. And it's, again, it'll take some years to make up for the years that it wasn't hitting on all cylinders. But I think Pat's got it going in the direction he wanted it going. Big Pat, not little Pat. Little Pat. You're little Pat.